So let's start with this second seminar, which is about something quite different of what we talked about on Tuesday, and also some of the things that we talked about yesterday in the field trip. So before starting, I ask, if you don't have a paper, I will ask you to do an exercise. If you don't have a paper, take a paper and a pen, and or a pencil, something to draw. Also, the ones that are connected in the streamline, just you can do this seminar, because I will ask you to. I will put a video, and I will ask you to try to draw the connections that appear between species in that video. Maybe it's a video that you have already seen. Probably you have already seen. It's quite famous. So just try to make a scheme of the connections of the species that that the video will show. Okay? You ready? Not yet? Do your best. Okay?
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years. That the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transform not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
Okay, so you have tried, and every time I try, in a moment I stop because it's impossible to draw all these connections. But basically, what you have tried to draw now is an ecological network, right? And you see, it's very complex. I mean, I'm not well. This video. Then there's been a lot of debate whether this is 100% true or not, because at the same time that wolves were introduced, there were changing environmental conditions, so it was maybe not only the wolves or so. But without taking into account that, what this video tries to explain is the quantity of interactions, both trophic and not trophic interactions that occur in nature. Here you have heard about the behavioral changes of deer when wolves appear, but because they just leave the area. It's an interaction, but it's not a trophic interaction. It's an ecological interaction, right? This is part of something that's called fear ecology, which is also a field that some ecologists work in. Okay, so today, and ecological networks are very difficult because they include abiotic interactions, trophic interactions, non-trophic interactions, etc., etc. So I'm going to go a bit simple, and I'm going to concentrate on trophic interactions, which is what we normally call food webs. And we talked about this yesterday at the end of our field trip. Diet of the species is extremely important. Basically, a species lives in a place if there's food and there's enough resources and they are not too much eaten by other prey. So basically, the diet of a species plays an important role of the biology of this species. So we have a lot to learn today. First, I'm gonna explain a little bit about what ecological or food webs actually, sorry, it should be food webs are here. Then we're gonna spend quite a lot of time in the next two sections about trophic levels and the characteristics of the food webs. And then I'm going to show you, well, and the matrix models, and then I'm going to show you a couple of examples where we have used food webs to try to understand what would happen if there were invasive species. So in the field of, let's say, conservation ecology. So let's start. So this is a food web. But basically, what you see here is a food web, and a food web basically is a draw, is a scheme. It's a scheme of the trophic, and there's only the trophic, no competition, just trophic, so who it's who, interactions in a community. What is a community? A community is a conceptual thing. And unlike, for example, an individual is a physical thing. I'm an individual, it's something that you can touch. But a community is basically a group of species that live in a given place during a given time. So every time we study a community, we have to describe this community. The scientist, the researcher, has to put the limits of this community. A community can be, I don't know, the microbial community in my hen today, or the microbial community in my hen during a year, or it can be the forests in the Amazonia. This is a community during 10 years, right? But we have to say what we refer to in terms of taxonomic groups, then where and when. Okay, it's a conceptual thing. The biosphere is not conceptual; it's the world. But the community has to be described, defined before starting. So let's say that the researcher here decided that the community was this, and he wanted to study the trophic interactions. So basically, this is the food web, and there's a couple of things that that are kind of sacred when we study food webs. One is that the predators are always above the prey, right? We just put the predators above their prey. We will never put the predator below the prey in this draw, okay? And the second thing that is very important is that the arrows always follow the energy flux. So we will never say, we would never put an arrow from the whale to the seal, like trying to say, the whale kills the seal. No, the way we draw it is the organic matter or the energy of the seal goes to the whale. So it's the flux of matter or energy, right? And this is very important because we have to communicate with each other, so we have to use some standardization. Another important thing is that normally food webs have to include the same taxonomic level if possible. For example, here you have, and this is not something that happens here, but here all of these are species, the whale seal, the leopard seal, the emperor penguin, but then you see that it's like flying birds or krill or a small fish and squid. And this is not a species, this is a group of species. This is what we call a guild. A guild is a group of species that share some characteristic. It's also something that we have to describe. So here is all the birds that fly in this area. So the researcher has decided that this, instead of a species, this is a guild. Food webs work better. I mean, when we try to understand this, food work better when all are species or are guilds. But well, sometimes it's impossible with krill, is what we were saying yesterday with insects. Well, insects, there's thousands of species. So we would put insects the same way that here they have decided to put krill, okay? So now we have to do, well, food webs, this is very nice, but I already showed you this the other day, but food webs are not that nice like the one. Food webs look more like this. This is not a specially complex food web. Well, this is only food web. This is a food web of the, it's a trophic food web. Here you see that there are no arrows. It was impossible. We had arrows, but it was impossible to put the arrows here. But basically food webs are normally complex like this rather than the other one, except in places where there's no many resources, so that there are many species. But in most of the ecosystems, and here, for example, a food web of the vertebrates would look like this. Okay, so why should we study food webs? Imagine that we study two species. And a predator, sorry, this is in Catalan, this is a predator, and this is the la preda, a prey. What we would expect, and what the, for example, the normal models of predator-prey of Lotco Volterra explain is that when the abundance of predators decreased, then the prey abundance would increase because there's less predators, so there would be more prey, or the other way around. If there's more predators, there's less prey because there's many predators, so they prey on more species, right? And this makes like a cycle. But sometimes what we find is something that's different. Is that when the predator decreases, the prey decreases. And how would you explain that? Well, there's could be the behavior, but in terms of trophic interactions only, or interactions. Now let me try something that I've tried before. Okay, so imagine that this is our, let's see if it works. This is our, this is the predator, and this is the predator, and this is the prey, right? And what we see is that when it goes up, or well, no, it was the other way, sorry. It goes down. This one goes down, okay? This is what we are not expecting. We're expecting that this would go like this, but it's not the case. So what can happen, and what normally happens, is that there's another prey. This is, let's say, prey A. There's prey B that has, that is also predated by this predator, but it's competing with prey A, right? And so when this predator decreases, and now maybe I can use another color. Yeah. Okay. So when this predator decreases, if this is a better competitor, if B is better than A, when this decreases, this will increase a lot. When increasing a lot, the competing effect on A will make A decrease, right? So this is what we call an indirect effect. So it's an indirect effect of the predator on the prey via prey B, right? Okay, understood? Okay, so this is what we call an indirect effect, okay? And what we have seen is that in many occasions, in many ecosystems, indirect effects are more important than direct effects, right? And this is something that you have to remember during the whole seminar, okay? And well, what I'm going to explain now are very global things with lots of exceptions, okay? But just explain general things. So this is one of the reasons why studying food webs is important, because it takes into account, or it has the potential of taking into account, all the indirect effects that occur and that we can track if we have the whole picture of the whole community. If we are only studying one predator and one prey, maybe we are missing some of these indirect effects that may have a more important role on the dynamics of these two species. All right, does it make sense? So we talked about the predator and prey, and in the first slide, in the slide of the whales, there were different what we call trophic levels. This is, for example, this food web that I showed you in a minute. This is what we call the trophic levels, right? So these are the, let's say, the primary producers, then predators and predators over the predators, etc., etc. This is what we call the trophic levels of a food web. So it's the different paths of the energy go upwards to trophic levels. And what we've seen is that there are normally not more than 5 trophic levels in communities. Normally it's 3, around 3, 4, and almost never 5, but more than 5. So why? There's basically three explanations of why there are only this amount of trophic levels. I'm going to start with this one. This one, basically what the people that study evolutionary ecology say to explain why there's not 6, 7 trophic levels in communities is because, evolutionarily speaking, if you are a carnivore, let's say, and you have to decide whether hunting on a carnivore or on a herbivore, let's say, it's easier somehow to prey on herbivores because they are not that aggressive and there are more herbivores than carnivores. And this is like the behavioral explanation of that. And then also the design, because normally predators are bigger than prey if they don't predate socially. And so there's a limit in morphology. There's not a predator that's bigger than an elephant, for example. It's impossible. Morphologically, it would be impossible, right? So these are, let's say, evolutionary explanations of this limitation. And there's another one about the fragility of having more than 5 or let's say more than 5 trophic levels. And then one of the most important ones is related to the energy. So about the second one, here you have a very simplified model. This comes from a model, and I'm not going to explain everything, but just this scheme is to show or to try to explain this fragility related to the structure. If we compare, for example, this food web and this food web, which one do you think that would be more stable? So less fragile. The first one, right? Because if one species disappears here, basically nothing happens. Well, it can disappear the predator, but then it's fine. This prey won't have a predator, so they will live happily. But if we lose one species here, all these will disappear probably, because if this one disappears, this will run out of food if there's nothing else. And so all these others will disappear. So basically that's why for the same number of species, here we have the same number of species, in terms of the stability, it's better to have, like, let's say, flatter structures. Yeah, does it make sense? If you get lost, I can explain again. Eh? So, and about the third explanation. So it's about the energy fluxes. Energy fluxes occur in all systems, in aquatic systems. Here you have the primary producers, which are the phytoplankton. This will be the first trophic level of this community. Then the primary consumers, zooplankton, and then secondary consumers and tertiary consumers. Here we would have like 1, 2, 3, 4 trophic levels. So, and the energy goes this way, right? And we have the same in terrestrial ecosystems. Here we have the producers, primary consumer, and secondary consumer, and we have like an eagle could eventually predate on the fox, which would be a tertiary consumer. Okay, this food web of 3 species, well, 3. This is not a species; it would be a guild, and 2 species. So this would have 3 trophic levels. So how the energy goes? There's 2 paths. There's 2 main paths in the communities that the energy follows. One is what we call the phytophagous path, which is the one starting from the living primary producers, let's say. So we have. So this is in Spanish. Sorry. So net primary production, herbivores and carnivores. This is what we just saw with the fox. Okay, but there's another path that the energy flows. That's from the detritus, decomposers, and then carnivores of these decomposers that may be insects or whatever. Okay, does it make sense? Yeah. Detritus is the detritus. How do you? Yeah, it's dead organic matter in decomposition. Yeah, both plants and animals. Yeah. Humus could part of the detritus, yeah, but that animals, that organic matter. And this is important. This is important because actually, can we move this? Alicia, can we move this out, or it's impossible? Yeah. Much better. Okay. Yeah. You can put on the top, tell me the title, so it's okay. Not that important. It's important because let's imagine this, and most of the works of food webs until, let's say, 10 years ago or so were mostly dealing with living organisms, right? Not with the path of the dead organic matter, let's say. But if you think a little bit about this, all the living organisms end up dying, and they all go to this compartment here, right? And so these 2 paths are extremely linked. And of course, there could be carnivores that eat both living organisms, herbivores and decomposers, which are also alive, of course, and also carnivores that would be part of this could be also eating herbivore species. Right? Here, this could be only one compartment, right? But what's important here is that you see that actually everything goes to this compartment. And this is important because whereas maybe it's nicer or whatever to study the living, the living organisms and that come from the plants, what we see or what we know now is that the flux that goes, or the energy that goes through this to this path, the detritus path, let's say, is much higher than the one here. In terms of energy, this one is much more important than the other one, okay? So, what happens in each of these compartments? In the compartment of the herbivores or the carnivores, etc., etc. Let's imagine that this is one individual. This is a, whatever, a cow or a deer. Yesterday we saw deers. So this red square is a deer. A deer has a lot of available food, right? Out of so all the plants that they have there in the field, there's available food. Of course, they do not eat everything. They just eat a portion of that. So this is what they eat. This is the way of ingestion or consumption, okay? And the rest is just not consumed. Okay? Out of what they eat, there's a part that is assimilated and a part that is not assimilated, that this is the feces, the excrements, okay? So of what we eat, there's a portion, well, what everybody eats, this deer eats, part is not assimilated, so becomes excrements or feces, and part is assimilated. And out of what's assimilated, part of it is invested in respiration, so to keep the structures alive. And then the rest is production, is for production. Plants will grow larger vertically, or they will produce more leaves, and animals will just get fatter or whatever, okay? But this scheme is very important because it happens in all of the individuals in the net, in the food web. For each of the individuals, this is what happens. There's something that's available, something out of this, there's something that's consumed, out of this, something that's assimilated, and out of this, something that's produced, okay? So from here, we can calculate efficiencies. And for example, the efficiency of consumption would be what's ingested respect by what's available. Available, this is the production of the lower level, okay? So this is the efficiency of consumption or ingestion is what's ingested divided by what's available. The efficiency of assimilation is what's assimilated divided by what's ingested. And the efficiency of production, it's what's produced divided by what's assimilated. Yeah? Let me just. Why not the energy that enter and leaves? Yeah, this is another efficiency. This is another efficiency which is called the Lindemann efficiency, right? Which is interesting as well. I'm going to talk about this in a moment. But so we have that. I can erase this. So we have, let's say, the efficiency of consumption is what's ingested or consumed by what was available in the level below, right? The production of the level below. If you are a herbivore, it's the production of the plants. If you are a predator, it's the production of your prey, okay? That's the efficiency of consumption. Then you have the efficiency of assimilation, which is what's assimilated by what was ingested. And then we have the efficiency of production, which is what's produced, divided by what was sorry, was assimilated. Oops. Then we have this efficiency of Lindemann, which is what's assimilated at level n divided by what is assimilated at level n minus 1. Okay, but these are the three efficiencies, and these efficiencies are always so. This number is always lower than this one, and this number is always lower than this one, and this number is always lower than this one. Okay, so it's never more than 1. What we know, well, here you have different communities: a forest, a meadow, a stream, and a plankton community. And here you see the fluxes of energy that move among the different compartments, and you see that the widths of the arrows are different, right? So each community, in each community, the flow of the energy, if this was is different. But so of course for each community, for each food web, let's say, we have to try to calculate these numbers somehow, right? Sometimes it's difficult to calculate all these efficiencies, but there are other methods. But have to take into account that the energy fluxes among the different ecosystems or communities can vary quite a lot. What we've seen is that when we aggregate the three efficiencies or calculate the Lindemann efficiency, which is really what goes from one trophic level to another one, basically is a 10%. So the energy that's in the producer's trophic level, let's say it's 1,000 joules. In the trophic level that's above it, the consumers, it's 100, above it's 10, and then 1, right? It's a 10% that it's a general rule. If had to, if I wrote an histogram of all these energies of most of the communities where we have calculated this, it would be like a normal distribution, and the mean would be around 10, but with a lot of variation. Okay, but this is useful, this 10% rule, and it's true. Because when we don't have all these efficiencies, we can apply this rule. What's important here is that the top carnivores have an energy or organic matter available, which is only 10 joules, right? So basically, it's impossible that a carnivore prey on these top carnivores because there's not enough energy to keep them alive, right? So this 10% limits the quantity of trophic levels. It's like these really low efficiencies of 10% between trophic levels. It's what limits more trophic levels, right? Yeah, questions? Okay. That's it. So a food web is a draw, right? So, and we need attributes, what we call emerging properties, yeah, to describe these draws. How many links, how many species, etc., etc. Because otherwise, if we want to compare my food web with another food web, only comparing the draws is difficult. We cannot take anything from that. So we need components. We need numbers that we can use to compare the different food webs. Why do this? Why it is important to have these descriptors of this draw? It's very important. Well, once, of course, for the knowledge, but then it has a lot of implications on the stability of the food webs. And now I'm going to speak about most of these properties, and we're going to ask ourselves whether a higher number of any of these characteristics indicates higher stability or lower stability of the food web. Okay, and this has a lot of interest when we want to assess the effects, for example, of a perturbation that can be punctual or can be gradual, but let's say unavoidable, like climate change, right? Which is not a perturbation, it's a change of environmental conditions, but may have impact or an effect on the whole community. Well, for sure, it has an effect of the whole community. So these descriptors help us see and describe the resilience or the resistance of the community in front of these perturbations. Okay, so let's start. First, a couple of let's say, vocabulary that we use here. So the species, we call them nodes, and the links, we call them links. Links. Sorry, this is in Catalan, but this is the link. So, right? Where if we people that study, let's say, ecosystem ecology, they would call compartment and flow. In food web ecology, this is a node and this is a link. Links can be strong or weak. And what does it mean? A strong link indicates that this is what we call the interaction strength. A strong link indicates that the effect, there's different description of the interaction strength, but we could say that it's the effect of the per capita effect of the predator on the prey, right? So the higher the interaction strength, the higher the effect that this predator has on the prey. Right, so nodes, links, and the interaction strength. Sometimes, if we can calculate the interaction strength, there's different ways of doing it. So the higher this interaction strength is indicated by wider arrows. Otherwise, all the arrows have the same size and same width. Okay? Well, the trophic position of a species. There's only 3 possible trophic positions. They can be basal, they can be intermediate, and they can be culminal. Basal species in our communities are the species that do not fit on everything, which in reality is not true. But remember that I said that the community is something that you describe. So if I say that the first trophic level that I study is the herbivores, my basal species will be herbivores. Although I know that they eat plants, right? But if I'm not taking into account plants, then my basal species is the herbivore. Then we have the culminal species, which are the species that don't have a predator. And then all the ones that are in the middle are the intermediate species. Okay. No, well, I mean, as I said before, the community is what you decide to be your community. So, of course, you can, I mean, if you can, or if you want to include the plants, the primary producers in your community, you are free to do that. I mean, that depends. Yeah. Yeah, then the intermediate, if you have the plants, they will be the basal species, and the cows or the herbivores will be intermediate, and the ones that eat the herbivores will be culminal. So, but was just here. So imagine that we have A, B, C, D, F, and G, and we have this food web, for example, and then I will use this for another thing, right? So here, my basal species are A, B, and C. My culminal species is G, because it has no predator, and then F, D, and E are intermediate species, okay? And you can decide, depending on your objective, which are these species. And even these species, it does not need to be the super predator. It can be the fox. In the diagram, in the figure I showed before, there was a fox, and eagles eat foxes, for example. But for that food web, yeah. but then you need, if you are studying this, you need to know the numbers of the, whichever, for example, the production of A, B, and C, to know the energy fluxes, right? Depending on what you want. I mean, that depends on your objective. The community is the first thing you have to describe. Okay. For example, in that scheme that we did in the Pyrenees, we said, okay, our community is the vertebrate community. No insect, no plants, because we had the numbers or the information, and we were interested in the vertebrates, and we didn't. Not that we don't like plants or insects, but we didn't want to take them into account. That was our definition of the community. So when we talk about the food web, or that food web of the Pyrenees, is the food web of the vertebrates of the Pyrenees, right? Oh. Sorry, I take this out, take the mask out, and speak louder. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, but you, in your community, the bear can be here if it has a predator, or here if it has no predators. So that's why it's important to define and describe your community before you start, right? Okay, then connectance is a very important attribute of, I think it's the most important or the most used attribute when describing the food webs. And basically is how many of the possible links between species are exist in the food web, right? So L is the number of links. And well, it can be direct or indirect. Let's stay with the direct links. It's the number of links, L, divided by the number of species square, right? For example, in my food web, here, what would be the connectance? Connectance would be the number of species, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 divided by the number of links, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, sorry, I have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7. No, 7 links. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 8 links. Oh, 8 links by 7 square species. Okay, we have 8 links. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 7 species. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and this is 0, 16. Okay, so this would be connectance. The connectance of this community would be 0, 16. What does it mean, connectance 0, 16? What do you think that it means? Yeah, so but basically it means that there's only 16% of the possible links, right? But what does the number tells us? This 0, 16. Nothing if we don't compare to another connectance, right? So if we had another food web with more links, the connectance would be higher, right? And then this is what we can use this. This is a descriptor of that draw, and it says that its connectance is 0, 16. Okay, but per se, as a number, it's 0, 16. Okay. But it's useful when we compare, let's say, what happens when we extinguish one species, then the connectance will be lower or higher. So we can, most of these attributes are useful to compare communities, to compare food webs, right? Now, a very important question. do you think that higher connectance, do you understand, like, for example, that higher connectance is higher complexity? Let me go like this, okay. Imagine that then I have this other community, right? And still like this. Which food web? So this second food web with the black and brown arrows would have a higher connectance, right? Because with the same number of species, the number of links would be higher, right? Which one is more complex? The second one, right? It has more arrows around, so we could agree on that the complexity of this one is higher than the complexity of the first one, of the black one. Yeah? Which one do you think that is more stable? The first is more stable. So raise hands, the ones that think that the, let's say, the simpler one, the black one, is more stable. Nobody? So you think that the one that is more complex is more stable? Yeah? Okay, so write in your papers that higher connectance, more stable, well, whatever you have decided. Higher connectance, higher stability. No, you say? Yeah? You all say that the second one is more stable than the first one. Yeah. Okay, just write it. Higher connectance, so higher complexity, higher stability. Okay. I will put it here. So higher connectance, higher stability by majority. Okay. Okay, here, so this is one of the most important descriptors, okay? Just for you to have an idea of how the numbers are of connectance, this is the food web of the vertebrates that I showed you before. And you can see here, here's the number of species, the number of links. So let's just look at connectance. See that the values of connectance are really low, 0.0 something everywhere, right? So, and these are the normal values of connectance. Connectance values are really low. Even though that food web seemed very complex, it has only 3% of the possible links, 2%. And this is quite common. Connectance values are around these values, right? So if you ever have a food web that has a connectance of 0.7, most likely is not correct, right? So you have an idea more or less of the numbers that connect us. Another important attribute is the link length or link density, which basically is the number of links by number of species, this is the number of links that each species has on average. So for our community, I'm going to delete the black. So for the black community, okay, the link density is the number of links by the number of species. So we had 8 species and 7 links. So I calculated it before, 1.14. Okay, this would be the link density. So again, this is another, it shows how many links go to or go from each of the species of our food web, right? Yeah, on average for our community. What do you think that the higher, so it would be the mean of all the arrows that go to or depart from each of the species, right? Would be the average. And for the black one, if you calculate, if I'm not wrong, it's 1.14. So higher link density is more or less complex. Higher link density is higher complexity. It's higher complexity. Okay. So again, higher link density would be a community with a higher link density would be more stable or less stable. more stable, right? You have, I mean, if you said that higher complexity connectance is higher stability, higher complexity for you is higher stability. Okay, write it down. Higher link density, higher stability. All right, makes sense. Okay, link density can also be divided in two variables that are called in degree and out degree, which is important. We can say like link density in terms of out degree density. Out degree is the links that depart from a species. So that's an idea of how many predators species have on average. Or in degree is how many preys each species have. And this is also that we can calculate the out degree and the in degree, which would be kind of link density, but only taking into account either the arrows that go to or that depart from. Okay, but we are not using this now. But it's also an idea of how many predators on average species have, or how many preys species have. Okay, compartmentation, very difficult word. This is the formula, you don't have to. You will have this if you want, so you don't need to understand that. But basically it says how many modules a food web has, how many groups of species that are more linked among each other are in the food web. And I have an example here that makes things very easy. This would be a food web, right? But there's three compartments here. It's a food web that is in three habitats. So when your definition of a food web includes different habitats, it's likely that you at least have one module, one compartment in each habitat, because the species of freshwater are more linked within each other than with the species that are in another habitat, right? This is a food web because they are connected, right? But you see that here, all these have more connections among them than with the other species. So this would be a community with three compartments, right? So compartmentalization, or whatever, however it's called, compartmentation. This is calculated just making the summatory for each pair of species of the number of species that these two species have in common by the number of species that are related to one or the other one. Well, it's written, I think it's written here, but now it's not important. But it basically indicates us how many compartments are in our food web. What do you think? Higher compartmentation gives more stability or less stability? So if there are more compartments, the community is more stable or less stable? More compartments, more stable. But more compartments means less complexity, no? Because compare this with a given food web that has links, enough links between compartments, so you could not differentiate three modules. That would be more complex. And we have just agreed on that more complexity is more stable.
So in this case, compartment on the side, get that if the point with the sphere, we have a determination on the.
Yeah, but then it contradicts everything we have just said till now, no? So less complexity, because we would have a connectance number for this. And if we compare it to another food web with higher complexity, less complexity is less stable. So we agree on, yeah, you all agree? Okay. Well, if you understand complexity as the number of links that are connecting species, less compartments. Here, if we want to eliminate this compartment, these two compartments are clear because there's only one link that links this group with this group, okay? To eliminate this compartment, what we could do is just put like some arrows here, and this compartment would disappear. This species wouldn't be differently connected within each other, okay? A community with two compartments would be that these species were linked with this one. So we could have this compartment and not that compartment, right? So, so basically what we said is that, and let me write it down, that the higher, so more compartments, less stability, yeah? No, you said the other thing, no? What did you say? More compartments? More compartments, less stability. Less stability, okay. Yeah, then it makes sense, right? What we've just saying. So basically it's the same. So higher complexity, higher stability, okay? All right, next. Well, the trophic level, I just talk about that. We can, well, but the trophic level is the position. So the first trophic level would be the basal areas, the second, the third. But now imagine that, which is the trophic level of species E here, is the second, right? First trophic level, second trophic level, yeah? And which is the trophic level of species F? Second? No, 1, 2, 3. Oh. So we have two trophic level here. Species F is coming from here is the second trophic level, but coming from here is the third trophic level, right? So what we do in these cases, which are very common, is make the average. So species F would be the 2.5 in the trophic level 2.5, okay? When there's no doubt here, species E is in the second trophic level, either starting from here or starting from here. First, second, no doubt. But here there's a doubt, right? 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3. And here for species G is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we would make the average number of all these. That would be the trophic level of each of the species, okay? Omnivory is also a very important parameter of the food webs. What's an omnivore species? Okay. So the animals that have a variety of, we have to differentiate between omnivore species and polyphasic species, right? Omnivore species are the species that eat different species from different trophic levels, right? If a species eats lots of species, if a species eats lots of species of the same trophic level, it's not an omnivore. If an herbivore only eats plants, but many plants, but only plants, it's not an omnivore species, okay? So again, we go back to our simple food web. This is not an omnivore. It eats two species, but they are from the same trophic level. This is not an omnivore species. But this one is an omnivore species because it eats species from the second trophic level and the first trophic level. So this is an omnivore species, right? And this is also an omnivore species because it eats a species from trophic level 2.5 and trophic level 2. Okay, this would be also an omnivore species. But these ones are not omnivore species. So what's the omnivory? We quantify omnivory with this variable, which is the number of closed omnivory links divided by the number of culminal species. You know what a culminal species is? It's the species that doesn't eat, that it's not eaten by any other species. but you don't know what the number of closed omnivore links is. And the number of closed omnivore links is exemplified here. Here we have two omnivore species. The dark blue here is an omnivore species, right? Because it is a species of the third trophic level and a species from the second trophic level. Yeah. And this is also an omnivore species because it is a species of the third trophic level and a species from the second trophic level, right? No, we don't know, but we don't mind. We know that this species, it depends on your community. If you have decided that your community starts with plants, good. But insects, good. Animals, good. Claro, claro. Yeah, see. Oh, yes, sorry. So, but this species will always be an omnivore, independently of this being a plant or an animal or whatever, right? Because this is from the third trophic level and this is from the second trophic level. So it predates on species of different trophic levels, trophic positions, right? So they would be omnivore. Both would be omnivore species. But there's only one close omnivore link, which is this one. This group of three species create a closed omnivore link when the omnivore species eats both, so the energy goes directly to it and indirectly through another species. Yeah? So both the species are omnivore, but a closed omnivore link is here and not here because the energy goes, does not go indirectly to the omnivore species, okay? If we had an arrow here, we would have another closed omnivore link here, right? So do you think that this gives stability to the trophic web or not? Or it doesn't matter? Having these closed trophic links provide stability to the... Eh? It depends. Good answer. Now okay, so it's more complex. Well, it's not more complex. Well, yeah, it can be more complex. Okay, so more omnivore links, more groups of three like this are more stable, right? So you all agree? Yeah, no?
Because if the second element disappears, disappear also the third.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but yeah, you're right here. But imagine that it's within a huge food web. But for example, here in my case, in my case, here we have well, now let me erase this because let me delete this. So it's going to be simpler. Let me just take it out. So how many closed omnivore links we have here? One, right? This one. So the energy goes from the lowest trophic level of this trio directly to the omnivore species and indirectly, let's say, through species D, right? So here we would have one trophic link. So if what you said, if this one disappears, okay, but then this has this one and then it has the one. So if the food web was only this, only the scheme before, yeah. But you have to imagine that omnivore links occur within the whole food web, okay? So we said that more of these links provide stability, okay? Let me show that. So the degree is the number of trios, divided by the number of communal species. In our food web, it would be 1 divided by 1, right? So if there were more links, there was another, it would be 2 divided by 1. So the more trophic links, the more omnivore closed omnivory links, the higher stability, right? That's what you say. Because again, so this community, which is the omnivory degree, here, omnivory degree. No, wait, I just put it here. Omnivory degree of this one would be the number of closed omnivory links, which is one, right? Divided by the number of culminal species, which is one, right? Again, like as I mentioned with connectance, this is nothing. Omnivory degree one, yeah, one, right? But if we compare this with another food web that has, for example, this, sorry, okay, with this, which here we have another closed omnivory link, right? So then the omnivory degree of this second food web would be 2 divided by 1, 2, right? So the omnivory degree of this second community would be higher than the omnivory degree of this first community. We compare communities before and after a perturbation, after a management action, whatever, right? So we just said that higher omnivory degree gives more stability. Yep, this is what we said. Higher omnivory degree, higher stability. Okay. And I think we are going to finish here with these characteristics. Another important one is the biomass relationships, and basically this is the relation of biomass between the predators and the prey. Right? To give you an example, here in this work we compared and this is called the predator-prey mass ratio. Right? And basically we have here, so for that food web in the Pyrenees, what we were studying the community at low elevation, intermediate elevation, and high elevation. And we compare, and this is the distribution of each couple of predator-prey mass ratios. So the mass of the predator divided by the mass of each prey. And then it has a distribution, right? Now let's look only at the top ones. Okay. So you see here, and for 2 periods, these were 2 10-year periods. This was from 80 to, so period 1, which is the light color, is from 1980 to 1990, and period 2 is from 1990 to 2000. Okay, so we see that the predator-prey mass ratio decreases and is lower, especially in the low elevation, a little bit if you want at the intermediate elevation, and a little bit at the low elevation, right? In the distribution is in period 2, it goes like this. It's a bit smaller than in period 1. Okay, do you see it? Yeah. So the distribution here is very clear. For example, the distribution of period 2 would have maybe an average a bit. Low elevation, intermediate elevation. This is for the Pyrenees. So we divided that food web, the food web that I showed, into 3. The species that live at the low elevation, the species that live at the intermediate elevation, and the species that live at the high elevation. Yeah. All the species that live at the low elevation, we divide the mass of the predator by the mass of the prey. Yeah, one trophic level and the one below for all the pairs of predator-prey species. No, the high. This is elevation, eh? So meters above sea level. So we divided the mountain in 3 sections. Yeah, yeah. So this was, I don't remember, from 1,000 to 1,700, from 1,700 to 2,000 something, and above 2,000 something, right? So we had 3 food webs. We have 3 food webs. And then for each pair of predator and prey, we divided the mass of the predator by the prey, and we just plot the distribution. All right. So you will agree with me that in period 2, so in the second decade of a study, these values are a bit lower, right? Yeah. So it could be due to two things. The relation between predator and prey would be explained either because preys are bigger or predators are smaller, right? Because this is the prey divided by the predator, the prey divided by the predator divided by the prey. Okay. So if this number is smaller, this can be because the predator is smaller, or because the prey is bigger. So then we analyzed which was the case. And here you have the distribution of weights of body mass of the prey species, only the prey species. And you see that for period 2, dark is not here, well, a little bit, but the number is bigger. Yeah. So that means that between the two periods at the 3 elevations, preys are bigger in general. And it's not that the preys, in our case, it's not that the preys got fatter, it's that there were more big preys. We had the appearance of wild boar that in the 80s did not exist, and they added high mass values in the prey level. We also had the appearance of deer that did not exist before, or they were not that abundant. And so this increase of the prey biomass is due to the arrival of the higher abundance of this prey species, the big ungulates that before they were not there. Okay. So what do you think that's more stable? A community with lower values of predator prey or higher values of predator prey? Which means that if lower values, what does it mean? That the preys are bigger compared to another food web. What's more stable? In our case, what's more stable? A community with bigger preys having the same predators, with bigger preys or with smaller preys? More stable, which one? With the small preys is more stable. It's true. Yeah, you're right here, because for an eagle, for example, that's why an eagle predates on the chick of deer and not on adults. It's more difficult. And if you remember the evolutionary explanation of trophic levels, that it's impossible morphologically to have huge predators. Morphologically is impossible, right? So for and this also, again, this depends. I mean, this number is nothing if we don't compare it to another number. Predator prey mass ratio of 1.3 means nothing if we don't compare it to another value, right? But in general, for these two communities that are two different decades in the same site, this community, so the community of the second decade with higher preys, with larger preys could be less stable than the one, because for the existing predators, it's more difficult to prey on bigger, larger preys, right? Okay. Sorry, it's too much, but I told you that you had a lot to learn today. And this is the last one, if I remember. So this is, if I remember well. So this is the last one. This is also very important. That's a trophic chain length. And this is calculated in the following way. This is the number of links that go from all basal species to all culminal species, and divided by the number of paths. For example, in this food web, we would have to calculate all the paths from all the basal species to all the culminal species, which would be, for example, 1, 4, 11, 12, 1, 4, 12, 1, 4, 5, 12, 1, 5, 12, 1, 5, 13, right? And this is what we have here. 1, 4, 11, 12, 1, 4, 11, 13, 1, blah, blah, blah. These are all the possibilities that the energy has, let's say, to go from the basal species to the culminal species. Yeah. So we would divide the links. The number of links would be links, not species. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., by the number of paths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc., etc. Okay? Yeah? So the number of total links divided by the number of total paths. And what do you think that this trophic chain length indicates? Imagine that we have the same number of links, so that we have the same, but with half of the paths. How would the structure of this food web be if we had the same number of links, but with fewer paths? Less complex, and in terms of a structure, well, it would have the same number of links, same number of species, but fewer paths. I don't eliminate the number of species, you just eliminate paths. So not necessarily less complex, but for sure, more vertical, right? Because if I have the same number of links, but fewer paths, I just have to add paths to here. So it would be more vertical. Yeah, does it make sense? And more vertical for the same number of species, number of links means more or less stable, less stability, right? So the higher this trophic chain length, because remember that the number of paths is the division, so it's the number of links divided by the number of paths. If the number of paths is lower, the trophic chain length is higher. So higher trophic chain length is lower stability with the same number, but again, with similar complexity, right? Because we have the same number of links, same number of species. It's not about the complexity, it's about the structure, okay? Okay, now, there was a model, there was made in 1972, if I remember well, by an ecologist that made a model to try to find a threshold for the stability of a food web, okay? And this model included 3 parameters. The number of species, this is the interaction strength, right? So the effect of a species J on a species I, right? Remember that the effect of the predator on the prey, right? The interaction strength. And well, this had these 3 parameters, right? So it built this was a theoretical work, had n species and interaction strengths. And of course, well, he made a network with all these n species and all the interaction strengths that the model described. So from this model, they could calculate number of species, connectance, which remember is the number of links divided by the square of number of species, and the average values of the interaction strength, right? It's as if we had this this community. We would have the number of species. We could calculate connectance, which is actually 0.16, and then we would assign values of this strength, of this interaction strength. So they saw, modeling many different webs, etc., that the network, the food webs were only stable when this product of the mean interaction strength by the species at connectance at 1/2 was lower than 1. Lower than 1. What does it mean? That if we increase the number of species and or increase connectance, increase complexity, or increase the interaction strength, the community becomes unstable, right? Because there's chances that it will be higher than 1, right? So the higher the complexity, the lower the stability. Yeah, so we were wrong in most of our guess, let's say. But again, as I mentioned before, there are many exceptions. But in general, the higher the complexity, the lower the stability. And you know why, but you don't know that you know. But I've told you in the beginning of the talk why. Why do you think that in general, the higher the complexity, the lower the stability?
Higher complexity, if something happens, it doesn't happen. For example, the extinction of a species, there are more consequences because I have
Exactly. No, sorry, he did it before. That's exactly for that. Remember that I said before that in most cases, indirect effects are more important than direct effects. So with higher complexity, there's more connections between the species. So any perturbation can spread out more easier than if you have fewer links, right? But if you have, but the important thing of this is that you can have complexity in different ways. Not necessarily complexity means more vertical or more, right? For the same complexity, a vertical food web would be more unstable than a flat food web for the same number of links and the same number of species, right? But for the same number of, for food webs that have the same number of species, the more connections you have, the more likely is that a perturbation will affect more species, right? And why it's bad also that the interaction strength, if the interaction strength increases, is less stable. That means that higher interaction strengths means a higher dependence of the prey under the predator, right? The effect is higher. So if this is higher, then it means that whatever happens has higher consequences. Yeah. So for where am I? If this, no, this is not a good example. If this is a high interaction strength, that means that the effect of G over E is high. If this increases, the consequences for E are very bad because the effect is high, right? If this is low, then okay, that means that the effect of G, well, this is a simple web, but it means that the effect of G over E is low. So basically, it would not affect much the dynamics or the structure of the food web if something happens, right? But this is high, it means either higher dependence or higher effect, depending on who you are, the predator or the prey, right? And that's why also higher average of interaction strengths means less complexity. It means lower stability. All right? Yeah. But there actually, and also that means that that explains why higher compartmentation, which is lower stability, lower connectance, gives stability. And also in the case of connectance, of compartmentation, sorry, which was here. If something, it's what you said actually, what you said in the beginning, but then you didn't link it to complexity. But if something happens here, this compartment buffers the effect that spreads out, right? If something happens to it, well, there's a mistake here because you see that this is not connected to anything, but if let's say that something's happened here, 22, then the effects will go here and maybe a bit there, but mostly the effects will stay here, right? There are exceptions in terms of compartmentation, because imagine that something happens to species 16, then we have a disaster here because all this food web, all this compartment is separated from this. And also you see that 16 is one of the species that link the two compartments, right? And now we're going to speak about the species that have species like 2 or 16, etc., right? But here lower complexity, which is higher compartmentation, is also more stable because the effects will remain within the module or the compartment. Okay. Okay. So about these species, like the ones that I just showed you, that have important roles in a community. Here, you might have heard about keystone species, right? Keystone species are species that that if they disappear, there are, let's say, important effects on the food web, like secondary extinctions or so, etc. Right? But we have to differentiate keystone species with dominant species or hard or strong interactors, right? For both types of species, the effects of their extinction results in secondary extinctions. The difference is that keystone species are not abundant, and dominant species or strong interactors are abundant. So, and it makes a lot of sense for the dominant species. If you imagine a pine forest has many pines, right? So pine trees are strong interactors because if they disappear, all the community that's related to them will disappear, right? So it's okay. I mean, the effects or their importance in the community is proportional to their abundance. With keystone species, no, it's inverse. They have a high impact of a species, but they have a low biomass, low abundance. These are the keystone species, and keystone species can be keystone for many reasons. One is because their trophic role, but there are others. For example, most of the predators are keystone species. You know that if predators disappear, then it's what happens with wild boars or deer, that they don't have predators, or what we saw in the video before, the arrival of wolves made lots of changes, right? So the top predators don't have higher densities because remember that the energy that they can get is low. So always the biomass of predators and the abundance of predators is low, but they have an important role in the community. So most predators are keystone species. But then we can have also other keystone species for their role. For example, the how do you call the castori? Castori. So castor, it's not because of what they eat, but castori make these dams, these habitats that and create new habitats. And it's not, and so many species depend on the presence of castori. I don't remember how they call it in English, but castori, right? And these are keystone species because if they disappear, all the community that needs these calm waters will disappear, right? So there's different, in most cases it's because of their trophic role, so top predators, but not only, okay? Just to give you an example, this is an experiment that appears in all ecology books. It was a simple system when you have this top predator, which is a starfish, and that this is let's say the web of interactions. What they did, they eliminated the top predator, and what happened? You see that there's many things that happened, but basically what happened is that this species that was predated by the starfish, so it took over everything, and so all the algae disappeared, and this species also disappeared, etc., etc. So basically, the extinction in this case was artificial extinction because they just removed these species of certain places, provoked secondary extinctions. So this is an example of a top predator being a keystone species, okay? And so until now, and actually in the beginning, I said something that has to do with this concept of trophic cascades. Now, let me, so what would you expect? Here, we have let's make it simple, A, B, C, okay? What would happen if the number of predators increase? What would happen to B? Increase or decrease? If we have more predators, B would decrease, and A will increase, okay? And if C decreases, B will increase and A will decrease, okay? Yeah, this is what we said in the beginning, okay? This is what we call a trophic cascade. So a change in the, let's say, direction of abundances about trophic levels. Yeah? But what could happen, what would happen if, isn't there something strange on what I did right now? Well, basically I started from the top, but what if I start from bottom? If A increases, what will happen to B? Huh? Increase, right? And to C? Increase. And what will happen if A decreases to B? Yeah, and C decreases, okay? So here, you see, starting from the top, you have this alternation of signs. Starting from the bottom, it's increase, 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 or decrease, 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 okay? So this is what we call a trophic cascade, right? And this is not a trophic cascade. This community is controlled, okay? We call top down. And this one, bottom up, okay? And here we have a simple food web of 3 species and just one path. But this is top down because I started from the top and this alternation of signs. And this is bottom up because it starts from the bottom, blah, 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 right? Which is correct? Do you think that communities are controlled top down or bottom up? Eh? No, depends. Now you have to say it depends. Yeah, yeah, it depends. But actually, it's both things that happen, right? But when, for sure, the community will be controlled bottom up. When? So when resources are limited, when the limiting factor is resources, for sure, it's going to be that, okay? Because light increases in this will provoke increases up there. If this is not a problem, which happens, for example, if our community was the insect community of the Amazonia, which is full of leaves, then there wouldn't be a problem of the lower trophic levels. But for example, in alpine lakes, which are oligotrophic, probably this is the case. And you see that nitrogen deposition in alpine lakes is causing blooms, etc., because of that. Because the more you have, the more nitrogen you have, the more primary producers, the more, right? So when primary producers, when the limitation is at the lowest trophic level, then control is bottom up. Otherwise, in most of the cases, in many, let's say, normal or standard, well, normal systems, it is controlled. But in season, it can happen. For example, here, maybe in winter, there's few resources. The communities are a bit more controlled bottom up, whereas in summer, and spring, summer, where there's lots of flowers and lots of plants, etc., the community becomes top down, right? But this has consequences because when you're managing a given community, you have to take into account the consequences of adding or removing a given species, or when we have invasive species, which is the role they'll play, right? If the community is controlled bottom up, it will depend, or top down. If the invasive species is a top predator, it will have huge changes on the community. If the invasive species is here, maybe not that much, because it's controlled by the resources, okay? Well, here you have a couple of examples, but I just leave it because I want to finish with this. So how do we quantify how do we draw the food webs? We make these matrices, where here we put the prey, all the species that have a role as prey, and here the role as predator, right? So, and the 0 means no interaction, and 1 means interaction, which is predation. So here would say that species 1 is the prey of species 2. A species 2 is the prey of a species 3. Okay, and this food web, when we put this in the computer to calculate all these things, we use this notation. Okay, and if it's more complicated, it's the same, right? Here, species 1 is predated by species 2, species 2 is predated by species 5 and 6, etc., etc. So this is the way we formalize or numerically, say in terms of in a sheet, instead how we convert the draw into numbers. Okay, so you can go from here to here or from here to here, right? And normally, if it's all zeros, we just don't put this. We understand that these species don't have predators. And here we could eliminate this, and we could eliminate this, because these species are not prey of anything, right? So we would end up with this. Okay, and I think that's all. Yeah, that's all. Well, this is just a couple of examples, but it's enough. Any questions? Yeah, because otherwise it's going to be late. As usual, I speak too much.
Also from
yeah. Well, do you have any questions or not? Yeah. Chat. Grande ritardo. Buonasera, no. Buonasera, no, no. Buonasera. No necessario. No, this is that. No, okay. Any questions? I know it's complex. Okay, good. So, well, so this is the world of, let's say, complexity and complex ecosystem now is this approach did not start now. I mean, the first people that started to quantify food webs did it many years ago, but computationally it was very difficult. But now with there's no limitation in terms of computer power. So this approach of food webs is now there's many people that use this. The only thing you need to know is the food interactions, right? You have to know who is who. But then if you are able to build the links, then it's easy. Well, it's easy. I mean, nothing is easy, but it's possible. And actually we take lots of examples of, so we communicate quite a lot with social sciences and even economics, because food webs, here we say nodes and interaction strength, but you can be, if you go to social sciences, they use the same approach. And you have the influencers that have lots of links and how the messages go from one node to the other. Or Google, all these big companies are strong interactors that have links with other things. So we use more or less the same, in most cases, the same formulas to quantify the same. What happens if we take this out? What happens if we introduce this? And sometimes with different names, but the formulas are the same. And we are, to say, the worlds are using the same approach, these different disciplines, like in social sciences, economics, and ecology. Well, okay. So if you have any question, you write me and I'll do my best to answer. Okay? Bye.
Thank you very much, Ben.
There's Natalia that's asking,
okay.
are the wolves in the video that happen usually in real ecosystems?